Unbroken, healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, Healing Through Storytell, the podcast with me, Madeleine Black, where I speak to people that have overcome adversity and have not just bounced back in life, but they've bounced forward and they are now making a difference to other people. And today, my guest is Azim Khamisa. Following the murder of his son in 1995, Azim Khamisa founded the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, the TKF, which started a subsequent forgiveness movement that has reached millions. He has received over 80 local, national and international awards, amongst which are, in 1997, he received the National Crime Victims Special Community Service Award, presented by President Clinton and Attorney General Janet Reno. In 2002, he received Search for Common Ground's prestigious award alongside Desmond Tutu and Ted Koppel. In 2004, he participated in the Synthesis Dialogues with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which was hosted by Pope John Paul at his summer place in Castel Gandolfo, Italy. And in 2006, he was given, I like the name of this one, the Spirit of Crazy Horse Award from the Reclaiming Youth Network alongside Muhammad Ali. In addition, Azim has been a recipient of the California Peace Prize in 2003 and the Pepsi Freedom Awards in 2006. He has received several other Peacemaker of the Year awards, several I think that should say. With a strong passion to share his message with the youth and to inspire non-violent leaders, became proactive as peace builders. Azim, in addition, has given over 1,000 presentations to over 1 million students worldwide. He is also the author of 5 published books. Welcome, Azim, to the show. So lovely to have you here. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Madeleine.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So because my show is called Unbroken, the first question that I ask all of my guests is, what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Question. I think unbroken to me means that at some level, even when you are totally devastated, there seems to be some divine help in that surrender. I truly believe the universe does not give you any more pain than you can handle. And when you are devastated by tragedy, which many of us are, or deep trauma, as is your case, there seems to be a spark of clarity. Every saint has suffered the dark night of the soul. And that was true in my tragedy, that although the hit was pretty unbearable, excruciating, and absolutely devastating, but there was a spark of clarity. And I think it comes in surrender, and I think it comes in form of divinity.
Yeah, I would agree with the surrender part, absolutely. So can we go back to that night when your son Tariq was shot?
Yeah, he was a good kid. He was a student at San Diego State University, an art student, brilliant writer and photographer. He wrote a brilliant piece when he was 18 that is on my wall about the philosophy of life. He was well-read, great sense of humor, was engaged to a beautiful girl, Jennifer. They met in school. His hero was Gandhi, a man of peace. And he had his ambition someday was to become a a journalist for National Geographic. He loved cultures and he loved to travel, and he was a good writer, good photographer. So, and he worked weekends as a pizza delivery man for a local Italian restaurant. And it was a late Saturday night in January of '95, and he was lured to a bogus address by a youth gang. They gave the address of the apartment building with the wrong apartment number. And it was his turn to deliver the pizzas. They routinely delivered pizzas in this area. It's a middle-class area in San Diego, close to where I live. Of course, he knocked on many doors, found out nobody ordered the pizzas. He came back to his car, got into the driver's seat, and as he was about to drive away from from the driveway of the apartment building, he was accosted by 4 youth gang members. 3 of them were 14. The leader of the gang was 18, and they have a gang initiation ritual, and the 18-year-old gave the order, "Bust him bones." And the 14-year-old fired 1 shot, which came through the driver's side window. My son was already trying to back his car. The bullet entered under his left shoulder blade. He actually traveled across the upper part of his chest and exited from his right armpit. But it was fatal. As the coroner explained to me, that the bullet followed a perfect path. I queried, I thought, a perfect path. I thought that was an interesting choice of words.
Yes.
But he was very quick to say, Azim, that I'm not trying to be insensitive. We don't see a path like this very often. And what it means in my lingo is destroyed all the vital organs in your son's body. And Tariq died a couple of minutes later, drowning in his own blood at the age of 20. So the sudden, senseless death of an innocent, unarmed human being, the overwhelming grief of a family, the total confusion as you try to navigate this tragedy. And it's every parent's nightmare. If I had been there, I would have instinctively put my body between him and the bullet. You do that for your offspring. So it's probably true in every species.
I can't imagine what it must have been like to be on the end of that phone call when you were told that he had been shot dead.
Yes, and it was Sunday morning early. I got a call from homicide to tell me that he'd been shot and killed. Of course, I didn't believe them at that time because, parents can't go there. Mm-hmm. You're a parent. I think you would relate to that.
Absolutely.
And my knee-jerk reaction was, it was mistaken identity. I live in the San Diego area. We have a lot of Latin American people here that have dark skin like I did, and like I do, and my son did. And I thought, it must be a mistaken identity. It didn't make any sense. And I quickly hung up on homicide, called his home. He'd just moved in with his fiancée, Jennifer, fully expecting him to pick up the phone. It was early Sunday morning, and obviously he didn't. Jennifer did, and she couldn't say anything. She was just sobbing. And that's when it hit. Homicide had gone to their home first before they called me. They tried to come to my home. I wasn't there. I was coming back from a trip from Mexico. And I was in my kitchen. I clearly remember I lost strength in both of my legs as I collapsed to the floor, hit my head against the refrigerator, curled up in a ball. and I don't have the words to describe the pain, or it's like a nuclear bomb that detonated inside of my heart. I knew that that life changed, that I was blown into smithereens that could never be found or come back together. Um, and I had my first out-of-body experience. I grew up as a Sufi Muslim, and my mom was spiritual, my dad was a businessman, so I grew up with equal emphasis on my spirituality as well as my career. And I believe in God, and I left my body because the pain was too excruciating to be in it. And I read that happens to trauma victims.
Yeah, this is quite normal. I have been in that situation.
Yes, so I think you can relate. Yeah. And I believe I went into the loving embrace of God. And I don't remember how long I was gone for. Felt like a long time. And when the explosion subsided, God sent me back in my body with the wisdom that there are victims at both ends of the gun. Of course, I didn't really know at that time I did not know the relevance of that download.
It's an extraordinary statement. There's victims at both ends of the gun.
Yeah.
And so quickly you came to this insight, this understanding.
Yeah, it was almost immediate. Hour and a half after I found out about my son's death, my best friend, I had to make some difficult calls to his mother, to my parents, to my daughter. Thank God he wasn't my only child. And then I called my best friend, and he says, well, don't do anything. We'll be right over. So he and his wife came over. His wife went to get Jennifer because she was by herself. And the first thing out of my friend's mouth was, we had homicide visit us to tell us that there were some eyewitnesses. It was a gang-related initiation. And the first thing that came out of my friend's mouth was, whoever these kids are that killed Tariq, I hope they fry in hell. And my response to him was, I don't feel that way. I see that there are victims at both ends of the gun.
And nobody would, think there'd be anything wrong for you to have a hateful or a revengeful attitude, but it was instant, really. Just in 90 minutes, an hour and a half later, you were able to have, I guess, compassion for this young guy, Tony Hicks.
Yeah. As I said, it didn't come from my intellect, Madeline, or it didn't come from my loving heart. And my friend is not a violent person either. He spent 2 years in a monastery in India and reads the Bhagavad Gita as a regular habit. I know, and that's what I was talking about earlier, that in deep trauma and tragedy, sometimes there's a spark of clarity. And I believe that gift came from a higher power. I lost Tariq in my early 40s. I started meditating when I was 20. So I had a pretty good foundation in my meditation. And I remember in the immediate aftermath, I couldn't sleep or eat. Your biological functions change, but I could meditate. Today I do 2 hours. When Tariq was alive, I used to do an hour, but in the aftermath, I was probably meditating 6 to 8 hours a day.
Wow.
That was a big gift, to be able to navigate this tragedy.
And I recently read your book, your first book, From Murder to Forgiveness, and they changed the law just before Tony was sentenced, didn't they, in LA? So he was only 14, but he was tried as an adult, which resulted in a sentence of 25 years.
Yes, they changed the law January 1st of 1995, and this was the first homicide committed by an under 16. It used to be 16, and they brought it down to 14, which Tony was. And again, this last year, they moved it back to 16, which is, I was happy to see that, because, you know, you don't put a 14-year away for 25 years to life. I mean, it's not humane. It's, you know, science today tells us it takes 25 years to have a fully developed brain. And he was very much a victim, as I later found out. You know, he was born to a 15-year-old. His favorite uncle was murdered in machine gun fire when he was like 7 years old. He was seduced by one of the girlfriends of his uncle at the age of 8. He was then sent to live with his grandfather, who lives in the San Diego area from LA. Had a pretty tough life. His father was never in his life, and shunned him every time he met him. And sometimes I wonder, if I'd grown up like Tony, if I would have made the same decision, you know.
Yeah, he
Of course,
didn't have a.
I know him well now, but you know, back then, this idea that there are victims of at both ends of the gun kind of led me to later forgive him and create the Tariq Khamisa Foundation to honor Tariq, to help my family deal with this tragedy in a meaningful, positive way.
If
That
some
I
people would find that very hard to hear, that you could forgive the man who took your son's life.
Yes, and you know, I recognize that he was not the enemy. That the enemy was a societal peer pressure that drive many, many, many young men and women to fall through the crack and then choose lives of crime and gangs and drugs and alcohol and weapons. That was a real culprit. And I was flabbergasted to see how huge a problem that is in the United States of America.
Yeah,
I did not know this. I did not even know there were youth gangs. But it's every urban and suburban city in America are terrorized often by youth gangs. We are the most violent first world nation in the world. I mean, Economist, which is a paper from where you are, and did a study, and they took 25 countries in the world, first world countries like UK, England, Japan, Germany, France, Australia, Canada, and they added all the kids that die in those 25 countries, multiplied that by 11. That is how many we lose in the United States of America. I mean, I still weep when I think about Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut, where 20
but they were
first
babies. They were
first
6,
graders.
7-year-olds. I think my 18, 19-year-old is still a baby. They were just 6, 7 years old.
Yeah, they were like 6 and 7 years old and gunned down by automatic weapon in the richest nation in the world. I mean, how did we get here is the, you know, question.
It's very hard for me sitting in the UK to really understand how freely people can use guns in America, because it's really, we don't have access to guns the way that Americans do, and it's very odd. It's really hard for my mind to understand why people would even want a gun.
Right, and we have more guns in America than people.
Yes.
There's 320 million of us, and there's probably 400 million guns. And, you know, not only we have guns, we have automatic, you know, war. You know, I always think, why do we have this AKR and all of this automatic weapons that can fire 40, 50 bullets in a second? You know, we're not the front line of a war zone.
No.
And then you have, on the other side, you have this, what they call the midnight special. Buy it for $20. It's made in China and has no safety mechanism even for the shooter. I mean, why do we have that? I mean, you know, and they're very prolific. I mean, we need saner gun laws.
Yep.
You know,
Very quickly,
we can take an example from the UK, even Australia and Canada. You know, but it's the the gun lobby in America is one of those very stronger ones, and somehow Chevrolets, hamburgers, and guns are American icons. You know, and I don't get it. I'm hoping, you know, we've had some crazy shootings in this last couple of weeks since Biden took office. And I think he's moving on some gun control, which I'm happy to see, you know.
it will be good because, as you say, it's society that's wrong. What was very interesting for me as well, that not long after your son was shot, that you reached out to his grandfather who cared for him, Plex.
Yes, you know, it took me 9 months, which is not very long, to launch the foundation, although I had the vision to do that in April. He died in January. I have a friend that has a condominium in Mammoth, which is beautiful. I spend a lot of time in nature. He gave me the key, says use it anytime you want. And you know, the initial inspiration came from my Sufi tradition. We have a 40-day grieving ritual when somebody passes. There's a similar ritual in the Jewish faith called sitting Shiva, which is
Yeah,
about,
I'm Jewish, so I know about that.
you know about that,
Yeah.
okay. And it's very similar. We have 40, you don't, you know, similar, you don't clean home or cook. I had a lot of people come from my congregation with food and support and
More
help.
food than you can ever possibly eat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. More, yeah, because and I live by myself, and I had a lot more food. And
Yeah.
but they prayed every hour. We chanted. Sufis are big on chanting, and I had to tell the story, and it was very hard because I would say Tariq, I couldn't say died. And then I was counseled by my spiritual teacher that the soul of the departed is in close proximity of family and loved ones during the 40 days. But after 40 days, it moves to a new consciousness because we believe there's a journey after death. And that excessive grieving by family and friends will impede this journey in the next world. And he said, I know this is a tough one, but instead of grieving, do good, compassionate deeds in his name, because that translates into spiritual currency and provide a high octane fuel for his journey in the next world. And that played like a broken record when I was in Mammoth, because, you know, obviously you want to do something for your child. And how do you do something for your child who's no longer here? But he gave me a kind of a means to say, do good, compassionate deed in his name, which will transfer a spiritual currency and provide high octane fuel. And that's when I thought, if I started a foundation to really look at the problem, which is youth violence, and put his name on the marquee, we would create millions of dollars of spiritual currency so Tariq could finish his life in a rocket. And, you know, and that kind of felt good because I came down from the mountain with a mission to create spiritual currency for my son. It was a win for him, a win for me, because I had lost all that energy. I worked as in international finance, routinely flying from London, changed suitcase and flew to Tokyo, and then I couldn't even get out of bed. It took all my willpower just to climb out of bed. But with this newfound purpose, that energy came back. And 9 months later, I launched the foundation. It's named after him, Tariq Khamisa Foundation, with an initial mandate of stopping kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence, and essentially a 3 mandate. The first was to save lives of kids because we lose so many, and important to do. The second was to empower them with right choices so they don't fall for the crack. And third was to teach the principles of nonviolence, of accountability, of empathy, of compassion, of forgiveness, and the importance of peace building and peacemaking. And I started with a simple premise that violence is a learned behavior. Tony, who took Tariq's life, was not born violent. No child is born violent. But if you accept that as an axiom, then nonviolence can also be a learned behavior. But you have to teach it, right? Your kids are not going to learn that through osmosis. And soon after I started the foundation, I asked the district attorney because, in my meditation, I was wondering how his grandfather, who was also his guardian, was dealing with this. And I asked him to introduce me to the grandfather. And I remember that meeting, although it was almost 26 years ago. And I told him, I'm not here in retribution or revenge because your grandson killed my son. The way I really see this is we both lost a son. And my son died and you lost your grandson to the adult criminal justice system. I can't bring Tariq back and there's nothing you can do to get Tony out of the criminal justice system. And I've started this foundation with a very lofty mission of stopping kids from killing kids. And the real reason I'm here is to ask for your help. I can't do this by myself. And it behooves us to work together because it was your grandson that took my son's life. And he was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. And here we are, 26 years later. He was still together with the grace of the universe. The foundation has been very successful. We've saved many lives. We have a safe school model now. We have 6 programs, 4 for youth. We've stayed in this space from 4th grade to 10th grade. Tony joined a gang in 6th grade and took my son's life in 8th grade. We understand that space of adolescence really well. Tony is now finally out. He's joined us.
Released like 2 or 3 years ago, is that right?
Right. He came in 2018 in November was his parole hearing, and my daughter runs the foundation, her brother's foundation. So we were both there advocating for his parole. Even the commissioner was saying, he says, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've never had the victim's father and sister advocate for the offender's parole. And I told him, I said, I met Tony when he was 19. He's 40 now. So I met him like 5 years after the tragedy and been in his life and taken the father role.
And there's a beautiful part in your book when you speak about when you did meet him and you looked into his eyes and you wanted to see if there was a killer, and you didn't meet a killer in his eyes. You met another human person.
Absolutely. I was able to climb through his eyes and touch his humanity.
Yeah.
That the spark in him was no different than the spark in me or you or anybody else who is listening or viewing this this interview. I wasn't expecting that, but I met the grandfather soon after I started the foundation. I waited 5 years to meet Tony.
And how was it then when you met him?
Say again?
How was the meeting of him?
Yeah, I mean, it was very cathartic. It took several hours of meditation to develop the courage to come eyeball to eyeball with your son's killer. That's hard to do. I mean, we are mortals. Sometimes you want to, wring his neck. But I knew that for me to complete my journey of forgiveness, that I had to eventually come eyeball to eyeball with Tony. It took me many, many years. And but when I met him, he knew that I had forgiven him because I'd been working with a grandfather for a good 4+ years. And
he was aware of the foundation whilst he was in prison, wasn't he?
Absolutely. He knew I had forgiven him and the foundation. And he was very well-mannered. He was articulate. He was remorseful. A likable kid. I wasn't expecting that. He didn't portray any of the typical attitudes of a 19-year-old in American society. And I wasn't expecting that. And then we spent a couple hours together, man to man. I had some difficult questions for him, which he answered in a respectful, well-mannered way. And when we locked eyeballs, and I'm trying to find a murderer, and I found another human being, much like me or you. I told him that not only you know, I've forgiven you, but I want you to know when you come out of prison, you can join your grandfather and me and work at the foundation. And then I left, and I clearly remember, even though it was 21 years ago, that the that my stride leaving the prison was a lot more bouncier than the one I came in with. And I thought to myself, why did I wait 5 years? Because forgiveness can be very freeing.
Yep.
And, and I knew at that point that I had completed my journey of forgiveness. And, and it was a gift. And then the next day I got a call from the grandfather saying that meeting you had with Tony yesterday totally transformed him. He says, Tony would always tell me, Daddy, he lived with his grandfather, calls him Daddy. I'm not gonna make it in prison. He's a young, good-looking, charismatic man in an adult prison. And our prisons are like zoos here, a lot of violence. But he says, after you met him and offered him some love and hope, he said to me, you know, as you were leaving, he said, Daddy, that's a special person. Not only has he forgiven me for killing his only son, he's offered me a job. I'm not worthy of it, but I'm going to try.
It's very restorative, because what you're saying to him is really, it doesn't matter where you start, it's what you do from now on that matters.
That's correct, yeah. And he has, since that meeting, he aced his GED, which is our high school certification at 22, at 94 percentile. So he self-taught himself. He's read the Torah, the Bible, the Quran. He asks me a lot about Sufism. He's close to his AA degree. And he just came out in April of 2019, had to be in a halfway house, finally released in October, and moved in with his grandfather. He wants to be a plumber. So he's studying to be a plumber and now
Always need
volunteer.
plumbers.
Yeah.
And does he help at all in the foundation yet?
Yeah. He's already talked to our kids on Zoom. We'll do a live assemblies. We did a piece together, Tony and I and my daughter, on NPR Morning Edition. Tomorrow we're doing, my daughter, Tony and I are doing a show on Tamron Hall, which is on ABC, Channel 10. It's a national show. We just presented in Colorado. He was supposed to travel there with my daughter and Benita, who is our program manager, but he couldn't get permission from his parole officer to leave town. So they Zoomed him in. So he's very much involved and helping, knowing that.
For people to witness the three of you, the sister, the dad, the shooter, all working together, it's a paradox, because it's a very painful thing and it's a very beautiful thing.
Yes, I'm glad that I had the eyes to transcend something so negative and get. I mean, you could take the position, he killed my one and only son, he should be hung from the highest pole. But how does that improve society? You know, I mean, I know, we've saved Tony in my heart so far. But the more important thing is, how many kids is he going to save as he's doing when he shares it? When he was 11, he joined a gang. When he was 14, he took Tariq's life, and he wishes he can turn the clock back. I mean, how many 11 years old in the audience are thinking about joining a gang or going out on a shooting spree? You know, Tony can stop him, because.
And this is why I really believe in the power of sharing stories, because I think if somebody hears it at the right time in their life, it has the power to transform. And he will be certainly making all these young people think and transform their life. And what is very evident is that you're showing young people, actually, you do have a choice. We like to think we don't have choices, but there's always a choice to take a different avenue.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I teach the young people is that don't just rely on your intellect and your emotion. Just don't rely on your head and your heart. Nothing wrong with an intelligent mind or a loving heart, but in life there are problems that even if you have a double PhD, that your intellect will not be able to solve, or your hearts will not be able to heal.
Yeah.
It's important to have a spiritual foundation. Doesn't matter, what kind of a spiritual foundation. They all end up in the same vein. And if you have an important decision, sure, go to your head and do the pros and cons. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Because the mind's a good analytical instrument. And more education, the better you are able to analyze. And if it makes sense, go to your heart. And we all have a sense of what is right, what is good, what is just. If it feels good, right, and just, don't stop there. We've all done things that we think, well, that makes great sense, and that really feels good, right, and just, and then say, why did I do this? Because we don't take the third step, is to go to your spirit and ask the question, is it inspiring? Will others follow my lead? And that's where transformation occurs. That when people hear the stories, and I'm happy to hear that you are teaching through stories, it's a powerful way to do it, is that they get to be touched deeper than intellect and emotion. I've had football players that came to me and said, you talk directly to my soul. Can I give you a hug? Surpasses your intellect, surpasses your heart, and hits you at your, I actually coined the word cellular.
It's just a felt sense, really, isn't it? You just feel it, and you don't know. It's like if you watch a good movie, when you start to cry, they know how to get you to feel. But again, it's that word paradox, because you had to lose your son almost to find your purpose in life. This feels like your spiritual purpose now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that was the gift I think Tariq gave me, because I think we all have a spiritual purpose. And as you pointed out, it's hard to know what that is.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Yeah.
And I did find my spiritual purpose through this tragedy, which is a paradox. And, I've been very lucky to meet a lot of important people in my life. And I met His Holiness the Dalai Lama half a dozen times now. And, in Tibetan Buddhism, they say that you attract everything that happens to you.
Yes.
I had a hard time with that.
Yes, same here.
And he travels an entourage. So I got very close to one of the monks that does his translations, although he speaks pretty good English. But and when I met him for the first time, when we were hosted by Pope John Paul in Castel Gandolfo, Italy, and I told him, did I attract the murder of my son? I said, no parent would ever do that. So I don't get that. And he says, you know what, before you were born, according to our tradition, and Tariq was born, we believe it takes several lifetimes to achieve nirvana or enlightenment. And we have lessons in every lifetime. And one of the lessons in this lifetime for you was forgiveness. And you had a contract with Tariq that he would come and then die in a very tragic manner when he was 20. And God gave us free will. So you still had to choose between revenge and forgiveness. And you made the right choice. So in your next lifetime, you don't have to lose another son. I know it's probably a very evolved view, but the Lord does work in mysterious ways. And sometimes the phoenix rises from the ashes. And sometimes out of tragedy, something beautiful is born, as is the case, in my journey. And today, I feel very fulfilled. I would never have written 5 books and given so many presentations. International finance was about money. This is about saving lives of children. Far more fulfilling, far more
contrast, yes.
Yeah. Not that I wouldn't want Tariq back. Of course, I would want him back in a New York second, but that's not possible. but the gift of being on your spiritual purpose is a very fulfilling experience. I always say, and I think it's a Scottish or an Irish prayer, that when you are on your spiritual purpose, you have a perpetual tailwind and the road rises to meet you.
Absolutely.
And I feel that I've been tremendously supported by the universe in this work, which I wasn't trained to do, but I've succeeded in it because I believe I'm on my spiritual purpose and the universe is my partner.
So for anyone listening right now that's maybe struggling with forgiveness, could you just leave us with some tips or some advice to how they could get to that place? Because to me, it's a place of peace and a place of letting go of all the hate
Yeah,
and the anger.
yeah. The first piece of forgiveness is the importance to separate yourself from the offender. Judgment is one of the biggest impediments to forgive. Leave the leave the offender to the higher power. There's no escaping wrongdoing. Karma always balances. Leave judgment to the universe. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. I didn't want to go through life in hatred and anger and resentment. Mandela didn't coin this word, but he made it famous. He said, resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. So if you stay in hatred and anger and resentment, it's self-abuse. You might as well take your whip and beat yourself up. So you need to have a perspective that there's no quality of life being a victim. I didn't want to go through life on crutches. I lost my one and only son. I know a lot of people feel sorry for me, but there's no life being a victim. There's no quality. So unless you forgive, you remain a victim. So if you can separate yourself from the offender and understand that all of this anger and revenge and hatred eventually manifests into disease, and that you want to not go through the rest of your life as a victim, and forgiveness is the elixir. And the way you get there is you have to grieve. You know, I'm always, grieving is good medicine. There's a Turkish adage that says, he who conceals his grief does not find a remedy for it.
You have to
So,
feel to heal, really,
yeah,
don't you?
and there's a healthy way to grieve, of course, and an unhealthy way to grieve. And I've written a lot about that process. But the important thing is you have to create a sunset on that grieving and transmute it into something positive. So while it's important to grieve, and the 40 days was not enough for me, it took me a good 3.5 years. But eventually you transmute that into something positive, much like I've done with the foundation. And you develop a high level of empathy, set the intention through meditation, because forgiveness at the end of the day is a blessing.
Yes.
So what is a blessing? A blessing is when preparation meets grace. And the preparation is to do the grieving, to have a sunset on grieving, to set an intention, to invite the spirit to help you, to develop a high level of empathy. And just like I was blessed with the gift of forgiveness, or the blessing of forgiveness, you can also be. I've written a lot about the process. I actually do a 2-day in-person class on how do you forgive. I teach 3 milestones of how you forgive people that have harmed you, and 4 milestones how you forgive yourselves, because at some point we've all harmed.
Absolutely.
So it's a very popular workshop. I just finished one. Now I'm doing it online, but converted into 4 days at 4 hours each. And if people want to take a deeper dive into how to forgive, I do 3 times a year. I actually did one in London that Marina was at. And of course now there's no travel, so I'm doing it online. And if they I do a monthly newsletter, and if they sign up for it on my website, we probably will do one in the summer.
I will put all your details in the show notes so people will get your details. So when I was reading your book just before I interviewed, there were so many notes that I took, but one of the the sentences, which I think is a lovely place to end, really jumped out at me. And it said, survival brought me face to face with another paradox. Through death, I learned the glory and the beauty of life. Azim, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Madeline. I know it's probably late for you, but have a good evening. And it's kind of early morning here in California.
Have a fabulous day.
Unbroken, healing through storytelling. Playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black.